Oh, it is good to be back, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to Drake's Dungeon. It has been a year, maybe even a little bit more than a year, since the last episode of Drake's Dungeon. What happened? What happened to Drake's Dungeon, you may ask? Not that we didn't want to do Drake's Dungeon. No. For a while there, I was working on both Battle Pirates and War Commander. And as you can imagine, working on two games at once didn't leave me with very much time, and one of the things that I had to let go, sadly, was doing the podcast. Now, luckily, back in October, Hank got promoted to community manager, and he took over Battle Pirates. And I said to the War Commander team, I said, one of the things I want to do after the New Year is I want to bring back Drake's Dungeon, the podcast. Players missed it. I missed doing it. And the War Commander team was resounding yes all around that they wanted to bring that back as well. So everybody was very excited to do it. So very much after the new year came around, we are here doing the first episode in basically a year of Drake's Dungeon, the first episode of 2022. And we got some exciting stuff for you. Here on this episode, we have our newly knighted lead game designer joining us. I think newly knighted is a good way to say it. He's been a designer on the team for a very long time, but recently took over the lead designer position. We have joining us today, young Russell. Say hello, young Russell.
Hello, I'll take newly knighted, freshly minted. Either
freshly
one works
minted
for me.
Is good. That is good. And you do smell freshly minted, but with a side of maple syrup.
Absolutely, that's what we tend to shower in. And it's like a long-term Canadian marinade.
There you go. And also joining us this episode, he's actually been in charge of story on War Commander, in charge of the lore and story for over a year now. But I don't think we've actually had you on the show since you took over story from the person who used to be in charge, Lore Master. Lore Master went over to other games. He's still with the company, but he went over to work on some other games. But you are officially in charge of the story and a designer here on the team, Fangorn. So welcome to the show, Fangorn.
Thanks for having me.
Yes, you're very welcome back, by the way. I mean, you were on one of the last episodes before we went on our hiatus. So I know that you've been on the show before, but it was... And actually, young Russell, you were on one of our last episodes, too. I don't know if this was... Maybe you guys killed the show for a while. Maybe it's your fault.
I will blame young Russell for that one.
Okay.
Yeah. I'll take full responsibility for that one.
All right, yeah, I think I'm willing to let you guys take the blame. It had nothing to do with me being way too busy. But I do want to say, first off, thank you for being the first guest, just coming back from this hiatus of Drake's Dungeon. And, you know, a lot has changed since we had this last episode. Like I mentioned, young Russell, you're now the game's, lead designer. And Fangorn, you're now the story lead. So congrats to both of you. How does it feel to be in these positions?
Well, it's very exciting. There's a lot of new opportunities that this brings for us. Obviously, there's a lot of pressure to continue the high bar we've set over the last year or so. I know that the team that we've put together can pull it off, and I'm excited for what is around the corner for us.
Yeah, we got a lot of exciting things that we're going to be talking about a little bit later on this episode too. So yeah, what about you, Fangorn?
Yeah, I mean, young Russell put it pretty succinctly there. A lot of opportunity, a lot of new things to try out. Yeah, it's an interesting challenge to do narrative for a game with as much history as War Commander. So it's exciting to do it.
Well, speaking of which, it's not just history we're dealing with, because you're also kind of making new history. We just finished out, or we're finishing out, really, the Iron Strike story coming up with this next event. And then we're going to be starting up a new arc soon with a new faction. So just briefly, can you sum up a little bit of what's been happening with this Iron Strike arc? And then give us a little bit of a taste of what we can expect to come.
Sure thing, yeah. So our protagonists, Greg and Jasma, thought they were stuck in a Ruby simulation, and Ruby simulation gone wrong. And the experience weighed on their friendship as a whole as they were trying to find their way out. And that was kind of the arc we had for the Iron Strike season arc. As a whole, it was kind of meant to be a narrative break. We'd had high stakes situations in War Commander for a while. We'd ended off with the Onyx arc, and that was sector ending sort of stuff.
The Onyx are always intense. Like, it's always the bad guy that I think that, like, there's just something scary about them. Just really scary about the Onyx more than I think any of our other enemies.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I mean, I'm sure it's not the last we've seen of Onyx, but the follow up for our next arc will be a bit of more fleshing out of the Greg and Jasmine story. Expanding it to encapsulate the consequences of what they had experienced during their time in what they thought was a simulation. And I think our community is going to be engaged with that story.
Okay, all right. So, are we going to be seeing a new faction, or are we going to maybe see something maybe we've already seen before with a little twist? Can you give us a little clue?
Definitely something you've seen, but with a little twist.
Okay, all right. So be on the lookout for something familiar but a little different. Okay, Okay. So, Russell, the Iron Strike brought us a whole bunch of new baddies that we've never seen in the game before, including units that could heal allies, which not only were adorable, but incredibly useful for the bad guys. So, what was the overall design ideas going into planning this arc, and what can we expect going into the next arc?
Planning any sort of new faction, which essentially the Armored Core / Iron Strike were. We haven't really seen them in what I would call the modern era of War Commander. They're all sort of pre-faction era almost. Anytime we introduce a new faction, we want to make sure, one, that they are a well-rounded faction, and two, that they're fun to play against. So with it being a vehicle arc that they were going to be facing, we wanted some sturdier units, and so the Armored Core made sense to focus on. As for the healing mechanic, we thought that it would be a nice way for players who play strategically to have an advantage. And so if a player were to focus on those units, they'll have an easier time defeating those bases. And so adding any sort of new gameplay into our game is, one, usually a bit risky, but two, if it works, it pays off really well, because it's great to be able to add new functionality to a decade-old game.
Are we going to be seeing any new types of mechanics going into this next arc, or are we going to be kind of playing around with some of the new stuff that's already been introduced?
From what I can tell, we're probably going to be sticking with some things that have already been introduced, but we might be remixing them in a bit of a different way.
I will say, from a player standpoint, the healing dogs is something that many players want, and I actually have had requests that they get skins for Max to get the robot dog skins for Max. So that's on some people's Kixmas lists this year. So if they're good,
honest, that's totally fair, and
yeah.
I would also love to see that.
Yeah, I think that'd be really cool. But we do know that with every new arc lately, with our new series units, we have a new experimental weapon type that's been coming out. So we have a new arc starting up, which means we're going to get a new one of the experimental weapon types. So what type of weapon can we expect coming up? And, can we maybe get a little tease on what the next unit might be?
So I can't tell you the name of the weapon type, but I will say that it's more down to earth than some of our previous weapon types.
Okay.
And so is the armor type. So this is a more, I would say, real world based weapon armor pairing. As for the new unit coming out, I think we are going to find a path to make this a very interesting unit, and I'm excited to see what players think of it.
I guarantee half of our players right now are reading between the lines of what you said, where they're like, it's more down to earth. Now, what does that mean? And they got
are the weapons made of dirt?
They got they got words on a wall with yarn connected to different things, and they're trying to figure out what down to earth means. And
a bunch of heroes' faces on the wall.
Yeah, it's going to be
it's like
a
a
whole
detective
thing.
Sort of thing.
It is one of my favorite things. Is like sometimes I'll tease on Discord like certain things, like maybe I'll show a piece of art or something like that, and then to watch the community like try to figure out what it means. and come up with like every single thing that it could be. And mostly I love watching how wrong they are, but mostly it's just great to see the ideas flowing and seeing how excited they can get about stuff and where it all goes. But I guarantee there's some people thinking that there's something in between the lines of what you said there.
Sometimes, though, they are onto something. There was one time when we had a What's New that Art had accidentally put in the new storage building our skin for way before we had the CC release where that came out. And so if players were paying attention, they could have seen it a few months early.
Yeah, and there's a couple things that snuck in a little early for CC17, and that gave a little bit of a preview of what was to come. So you're both designers on the team. You've both been on the team for quite a while. With Russell, you've been working obviously more on the overall design of everything, and Fangorn, you work with the story, and then you also work on other aspects of design. But what's it like, the process of combining the story planning with the enemy planning and the unit planning? Like, which element comes first? Does one thing inspire the other? Does it kind of all just I don't know, how does it happen? What kind of goes on when you guys sit down and try to plan out the next unit, the next story arc, the next enemy, what have you?
A lot of it is pretty fluid when it comes to the order. I mean, a lot of it will come down to us discussing, what factions we might want to see and which factions would make sense narratively, in which case Fangorn has more of a say than obviously the rest of us do. Once we sort of settle on what faction might make sense, when it comes to creating the units for it, that is mostly just pure design. What we would try and do is find the identity and the core themes of the faction. So, for example, with Armored Core, they're a tank-based faction. Obviously, we haven't seen them in a very, very long time. I think their newest unit was the Honey Badger, which was a very, very old unit.
That was like 2013.
Yeah.
That was like 2013, like the summer of 2013. I remember that. Yeah.
And so this was a great opportunity to essentially create a new faction in the shell of the old faction. And so we were going to get all new units, and we thought, hey, these guys don't really have any infantry. What would the Armored Core do for infantry, since they're a vehicle-focused faction? And so we decided that having a mechanized infantry, like you mentioned, the robot dog, made sense to have as infantry, so they didn't have any actual soldiers in the battlefield.
What do you think, Fangorn?
I would say that it can be tough to mesh, the mechanics of the Chosen Rogue faction and the direction that I usually want to go with the narrative. But it's honestly, I'd say it's a pretty concurrent planning process. It's not necessarily cart before the horse. I found it to be, the cart exists and the horse exists at the same time, and you just hitch them up and off you go. And most of the time you're able to get a good string of factions and faction units together. You get something like the Onyx arc. Part of our planning process is to find a faction that feels fresh, something that players either haven't seen in a while or have never seen before. Kind of like the Descendants. That was my brainchild, and so I would say it's a little bit of mutual inspiration at the same time.
Yeah, I think Descendants was really fresh. I think that was one of the cooler things that I don't think anybody was really expecting. Players definitely seemed to really respond well to that because, it was a whole new thing that we had never really seen in War Commander. Yeah, it kind of required a new kind of thinking, and it did make sense too, and it led right into the Onyx. I mean, they kind of went hand in hand. I think that's a really good example. So anything else that you guys would kind of like to add? I mean, it's been a year since we've done one of these things. Anything you guys want to bring up about War Commander in general?
Well, I mean, one thing I want to say is, a big thanks to all of our players for sticking with us and for giving a lot of feedback on the game as well. A lot of the direction that we go in and a lot of the things that we decide, they're based on what players say, in our forums on Discord and that sort of thing. And obviously any players that we have a chance to talk to directly, it's really great to, hear what they want, hear what they say, and try to alleviate a lot of the, concerns that they have and hopefully improve our game. I mean, I know it's an old game, but I think it's improving, every month. And I'm excited to see what we have coming up. I know we got a lot of big things planned, and we have even more stuff in our back pocket waiting to be released if we have the time to work on it. And I'm very excited for where things are going.
Awesome. Fangorn?
Yeah, I mean, I echo young Russell's words of thanks. It's an impressive thing, really, for a community to be as long lived as War Commanders has been. It's most online games don't last more than a couple of years. Kudos to you guys for sticking it out and continuing to enjoy the game. I definitely look forward to the future of War Commander. Lots in the works, and I hope that it inspires you guys to keep engaging with a game that you love.
Yeah, 10 years and going strong. Well, you guys are actually going to be hearing a lot from young Russell and Fangorn because they're going to be doing quick design and story updates every month on Drake's Dungeon. So they'll be doing just quick, brief updates on new units and things like that, and the story, and just quick little snippets. So they'll be popping in every month. And another segment that we're going to be doing will be answering community questions. So one of the things that I'll be doing is in the monthly survey that goes above the game, I will be adding an additional question in that survey every month that will give players a chance to submit a question. Now, we'll only be able to do 1 or 2 questions an episode, but it'll be your chance to submit a question, and we will pick a question or 2 every episode and try to read that. So I'm going to start off, though, with a question that players have asked me for quite a while, and we're going to get to the bottom of this right now that we have young Russell in the hot seat. Young Russell, what does your name mean? How did you get your name? What is young Russell? Why aren't you just Russell? Why are you young Russell?
Well, that's a great question, and I can easily answer that. So my first job out of high school was working merchandising in a now defunct electronics retailer. Now my boss in the warehouse had just recently seen the movie Up with his children, and I got hired the next week, and so he thought that I strongly resembled the main character of Russell from Up.
The little kid.
Yeah, the Boy Scout kid from Up. And so he referred to me, since the character is a child, he referred to me as young Russell consistently, to the point where the entire staff of 100 people at the store would only refer to me as young Russell.
I assume this is before the beard and you I guess the beard and all that.
Yeah, at the time I had sort of short, not spiked up hair, but it was upwards in a similar way to how Russell looked, and obviously wearing the uniform of the store, it sort of kind of looks similar.
So forever you will be cursed as young Russell because of a baby-faced at the same time as the release of the movie Up.
Absolutely.
Which, if you haven't seen Up, it's a great movie. Also, if you don't cry within the first 10 minutes of that movie, I'm convinced you're not human. If you're ever wondering if maybe you're human or not, watch the first 10 minutes. If you don't cry, you got your answer. So, all right, everybody. Thank you, young Russell and Fangorn. Thank you for being, again, the first folks back from our hiatus of Drake's Dungeon. And thank you for all the players tuning in. Thank you for all the players that have been asking me for this last year, when's the next episode coming? Well, it's here. It's here now. It's out. It's out now. Listen to it. Hopefully you are listening to it if you're hearing me say this right now. We'll be back again next month with a different set of guests, and we'll be talking more and more about a lot of things to come. There's going to be we have a lot of improvements that are coming down the pipe that'll be happening in the next few months even. Just so much stuff going on in the game. So you'll be able to hear about it first here on the show before it even starts making its way into the game. So we'll be able to give it to you, right here on Drake's Dungeon. So we'll talk to you next month. Once again, thank you for playing War Commander. Bye.